Hi everybody, it's Az here from Heel vs Babyface. Love it or loathe it, Mr. Pandaria has been a flop with the WoW fanbase. Subscription numbers are down 25% since the start of the expansion, and they're actually at their lowest that they've been in 7.5 years. More importantly for Blizzard though, profits are down considerably. Even though World of Warcraft is aging, that's a little bit too convenient. And in this video, I'll be giving my top 5 reasons why I feel Mr. Pandaria has failed to connect with the WoW audience. Whereas other expansions had a very clear theme of villainy established from the get-go, the Burning Crusade had the Burning Legion and Illidan, Wrath of the Lich King had the Undead Scourge and Arthas, and Cataclysm had the destruction of Azeroth and Deathwing, Mr. Pandaria's theme was seemingly about a race of people, the Pandarans, which had only very briefly made itself into Warcraft lore. It was no secret that Blizzard were attempting to tap further into the Eastern marketplace, but this made the expansion feel a wee bit cliched and potentially a little bit racist too. If it was a British themed expansion, they might as well have called it World of Warcraft Watto chaps, let's have a cup of tea and wear some bowler hats of Pandaria. Blizzard actually attributed the vast number of subscription losses at the beginning of Mr. Pandaria's life mainly to the Eastern audience as opposed to the Western audience, which surely threw their business plan for this expansion into chaos from the beginning. On top of that, with no clear villain defined, and then rumours started to circulate that Garrosh Hellscream was actually going to take that mantle in this expansion, didn't go down considerably well with the audience either. I mean, from an Alliance perspective, Garrosh was always a villain anyway, so it didn't really matter too much. And from a Horde point of view, he'd always been set up to take this role on at some point, and most people thought he was actually going to become a minor villain in some cases, not the main focal point of an expansion's life. We were hoping that there was going to be another puppet master behind the background pulling the strings, but this wasn't going to be the case. Blizzard didn't really endear the Pandaren race to their audience either. For the vast majority of the expansion, they simply came across as fat, lazy, good-for-nothings, always telling you to slow down and to savour the moment. But this is an MMORPG, and people don't want to slow down and savour, they want to run headlong into the next battle. There were far more suitable races on Pandaria which would have made far better allies for the Horde and Alliance, most notably both the Mogu and the Hosen that seemed to be very active in the early part of the game. Most worryingly though, this really came across as a joke that got out of hand. It seemed that developers had probably watched Kung Fu Panda once too often and had somehow managed to convince the rest of the crew it would be an awesome idea to make an expansion about it. It really, really wasn't. Daily questing. The incompetency level behind this is almost of biblical proportions. Once upon a time, there used to be a cap on the amount of daily quests that you could do within the World of Warcraft, and it was set at 25. Come Mr. Pandaria though, Blizzard decided to do away with this cap because they had created hundreds upon hundreds of daily quests to act as typical endgame content. And because they'd created so many, Blizzard boasted that no 2 days would ever feel the same. However, there were a few issues with this. Most of the factions operated off a progressive reputation system. You go from friendly to honoured, you'd open up a new area for that faction with further daily quests. Honoured to revered, another area with more daily quests, etc, etc. And because they were therefore segmented, you could only fit a certain amount of dailies into each segment. Therefore, these hundreds and hundreds of dailies that Blizzard had created were absolutely useless because it always felt like you were doing the same daily over and over and over again. But there was a coup d'etat. Something even more ridiculously special hidden. You see, when you completed a daily quest, you got 5 Valor points as a reward. The Valor cap for each week was 1,000. So if you wanted to get your Valor cap through doing daily quests, you would have to do a staggering 200 daily quests a week with which to get it. People were up in arms, and Blizzard were quick to alleviate their fears because they said, look, you don't have to do daily quests to get Valor points. No. That's simply another method with which you can do it. You still have your dungeons, you still have your scenarios, and you still have your LFR with which to do it. But that wasn't the case. You see, all the gear was hidden behind the faction vendors. The only way that you could get reputation with the factions was, guess what? To do the daily quests. And because the daily cap had been abolished, everybody felt obliged to do every single solitary quest that they could do for that faction to gain as much reputation as humanly possible, especially raiding guilds that seriously needed to get that gear to help their progression. It was an absolute unmitigated disaster, and needless to say, by the final patch of Mists of Pandaria, daily quests were near non-existent as fresh ideas had come to pass. Dungeons had always been the heart and soul of the World of Warcraft, and acted as the progressive bridge from endgame dungeoneering through to raiding. Vanilla had 20 of them, the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King had 16 apiece, Cataclysm had 14 of them, and Mists of Pandaria launched to 9. So far, nothing untoward. But Blizzard made a staggering announcement in patch 5.0, the very first patch of Mists of Pandaria's life, and they said they were not going to be adding any further dungeons to Mists of Pandaria. They were putting all their eggs into the scenario basket, this brand new content which was launched with this expansion. So what was the difference between a dungeon and a scenario? Well, with a dungeon, you needed 5 people and each role to be filled. 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 damage dealers. With a scenario, you had 3 roles that needed to be filled, and they could be filled with any of the above. You could have 3 DPS, 3 healers, or 3 tanks. 2 tanks, 1 healer. 1 tank, 1 DPS, 1 healer, 2 healers, and a DPS. You could have all manner of combinations that you desired. The problem is, when you're no longer required to fill each of the major roles within the game, tank, healer, DPS, then the content has to be adjusted accordingly to make sure that you complete it. Therefore, there was never any threat when doing a scenario. And when there's no threat, there's no risk and reward. And when there's no risk and reward, to be quite frank, there's simply no fun. Needless to say, people were turned off. But Blizzard were determined not to have their brand new content another failure of Mists of Pandaria. So what they did is they took some of the scenarios, they tuned the difficulty level to make them slightly harder, they put the word heroic in front of them, and then attached a staggeringly high Valor point reward for completing them, with also bonus Valor if you filled a criteria within it. Because Valor points were still pretty difficult to achieve within WoW, people flocked to the content and Blizzard waved their arms around and heralded them as a success. But behind the scenes, Blizzard knew that they'd dropped the ball. And even though scenarios will still remain within the Warlords of Draenor, the next expansion, dungeons will be made significantly more relevant, with their difficulty level taking over that of the LFR content. Nice try, Blizzard, but no cigar with scenarios. PvP in the World of Warcraft has never been fully balanced. I'm not even going to pretend that it has, but Mists of Pandaria took it to some laughable extremes. First things first, there was the huge gulf between PvP gear. If you dinged level 90, you could make yourself a crafted item level 450 kit. But to be honest with you, that 450 crafted kit was annihilated by the Honor PvP gear that you could buy, and the Honor PvP set was destroyed by the Conquest PvP set. The thing is though, not huge amounts of people went into PvP straight away. They went into PvE. And so when they turned their hand towards player versus player combat, they were getting absolutely annihilated thanks to something called PvP power. This was the brand new stat which Blizzard had added to player versus player in an order to curb glass cannon PvE players from jumping straight into PvP. What it ended up doing though was turning everybody into an absolute free honor kill. Because they had no PvP power to do any damage, they couldn't kill anyone. And because they had no resilience, they had no survivability and were getting absolutely destroyed. So Blizzard decided to try and make things a little bit more equal and took away resilience from gear and put it as baseline. Therefore, people who are out and about, at least if they got attacked, they'd have the opportunity to get away. But there was another huge problem. PvP gear wasn't scaling at the same rate that PvE gear was. And while PvP gear was still stuck around the 500 item level mark, PvE item levels were in the realms of 550 and 560. So suddenly, they didn't even need the PvP power on their gear because they were simply crushing the PvP geared people with their lower HPs and their same baseline resilience. World PvP was in tatters and Blizzard had to work really quickly to boost the item levels of PvP gear to get them at least competitive with their PvE counterparts. On top of that, we had all the problems that plague PvP throughout the year. Massive class imbalances, healers becoming now godlike, and the rise of crowd control. There are so many forms of CC now within the game, it no longer became a matter of who can smash whom the hardest with which to win. It was now a matter of who could control whom the longest with which to win. It made it a disgustingly drab and horrible affair. And I haven't even touched upon the Hunter bug, which was in patch 5.0. And when they used Stampede, their pets were coming out just as powerful as their regular pet. And it took 12 whole weeks for Blizzard to fix these problems. Oh my god. Blizz have announced that they are dropping a lot of forms of CC for the next expansion and also forcing other forms to share the same diminishing return. And with the squished health pools and damage outputs, only time will tell if that will rectify PvP, because in Mists of Pandaria it was absolutely abysmal. Looking for Raid strictly made its debut in the final patch of Cataclysm with the Dragon Soul raid, but there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Blizzard pushed it heavily in Mists of Pandaria. They'd already done away with dungeons and wanted LFR to act as the bridge into raiding, and with scenarios failing miserably, a lot of people turned to LFR as their end game content. There were some massive issues though. LFR is as far from raiding as you could possibly ever imagine and was full of vicious, nasty, apathetic people. Loads of people were turning in and simply AFKing. A lot of people are just simply auto-attacking. Another bunch of people think, why bother learn the tactics when raiders can carry you through? And then raiders were coming in and thinking, well, this content is well beneath us, why even bother? It was just disgusting content. And now with no other alternatives, Blizzard were waving their hands saying, yay, loads more people are raiding. The problem was they weren't. LFR wasn't raiding for a start, and secondly, because people were seeing all the content from the raids, they were dropping out of normal raiding and heroic raiding. Why bother putting all the effort into those other difficulty levels when you can simply see it on this trash walkthrough content like a sightseeing tour and not have to even bother? Ironically, even Blizzard understood that this was not the bridge which they presumably intended to go into normal raiding, and were forced to bring in a fourth level of raiding difficulty that sat between LFR and normal and called itself flexible raiding. And while flexible raiding was brought in to give an added challenge to people who didn't want to be bogged down by the pathetic LFR content, it wasn't too long until the flexi raiding scene started to get infected infected by the LFR community. Not content with their own epics from LFR, they now wanted to do absolutely bollocks all and get higher item levels in flexible raiding. It really turned the raiding community into an utter and mitigated mess. And with Blizzard reluctant to get rid of LFR, even though they've tweaked the other levels of raiding difficulty around it, sadly, it looks like it's here to stay for quite some time. So there we go. There's my top 5 reasons why I think Mists of Pandaria has been a failure. Agree? Disagree? Put in the comments below what you think your reasons are, and I hope you enjoyed the vid. Please also like and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and also twitch.tv/heel versus babyface for live streaming. And I shall be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.